Hey everyone, Supporter here. I hope you're all doing well. Today's video is on the Gamesir G7HE. So I purchased my G7HE from my local Argos here in UK, and it came with version 6.33 firmware out of box. And the Gamesir Nexus firmware 1.4.2 recognizes the controller. Now, I did have a machine with a custom installation of the Nexus, which was done for the Collide manual certification process to get the 1000 Hz. And that version was 1.3.9. And on that machine, the Nexus did not recognize the G7HE. So if your Nexus is not updated, you might have an issue it not being recognized. But once I updated on that machine to the 1.4.2, which I now feel like maybe I shouldn't have, but once I've done that, yeah, this controller was recognized. But yeah, 6.33 on the G7HE, and with this Nexus, we no longer have the individual profile options of different report rates. Once you set the report rate, it just sets it on the controller itself, and it doesn't say that at 500 it disables the audio, but it definitely disables the audio on the G7HE when you go to 500 Hertz. So at 250 Hertz, if I plug in a headset, my Windows should recognize this as an Xbox controller and will allow me to basically use it as an audio device. So right now it's in 250 Hertz, and if I check this audio, it will say that I have Xbox controller connected. Now going to 500 Hertz, if I come back, I still have the headphone connected, but it's going to go back to, it's not going to give me the option anymore for the Xbox controller. And same thing, I mean, 1000 Hertz never did that anyway. So yeah, 500 Hertz will disable the audio, and I've checked this on Xbox as well. Put it in 500 Hertz, there is no audio in 500 Hertz, and there's no audio in 1000 Hertz. But you want to be using 1000 Hertz on this one anyways. I'll show that a bit later on. So the 1000 Hertz on this one actually works just like the G7SE. Let me show you guys that. All right, that updates per second basically just tells you how many times these two values are changing within a second. So we have two values. So the reporter is basically half of whatever that's going to show. Right now it's in 250 Hertz. And if we just move it as fast as we can, so two values are changing, it'll go to 480, something like that. So 250 Hertz, because we have two values changing, it's a little bit different. Now, if I go into 500 Hertz, you will see that number jump higher, and it will go over 9, so 937, 940, 947, something like that. It's because it's going to basically sending more data, so it's 500 Hertz. But this one, when we go to 1000, you will see that the controller doesn't restart, the app doesn't restart or anything like that. I can still see in 1000 Hertz the control in the Xbox Accessories app, unlike the Collide, which basically, when you go to 1000 Hertz, it disables the Xbox license. So you don't find the control in the Xbox Accessories app, but you do get a proper 1000 Hertz on the Collide. This one is just like the G7SE. Doing basically checking it here, you will see it will be higher than the 500 Hertz. So it will go to like 9 something, like little bit higher than what it was doing in the 500 Hertz, but it doesn't do 1000 Hertz on Windows 10. So I believe if you're on Windows 11, you'll need the script to get the proper 1000 Hertz out of the controller if you are using on the PC. All right, looking at the stick resolution, I calculated this to be around 10 zones less than the G7SE. So this one gave me around 159 zones altogether. So it's 161, but there are basically two 0 ones, because when the stick was being pushed by the motorized solution, the other axis changed. So we get basically those sort of like dead spots there when the other axis sort of change. I've noticed this with the Collide and stuff as well. And you can see it starts a little bit slower towards the center, and then it's pretty linear. And these are basically those two dead spots that you can see there. Yeah, luckily they've kept that. However, they can get the linear output on the K-Silver. I believe these are still J16 modules, just have a different housing. So they've kept that. G7SE, if I show you guys the old one, you'll see a little bit more deviation. So these are basically those dead spots. Again, the other axis change. So it shows that, but G7SE had 168 zones, not 100 59. So around 4 or 5% less resolution on the G7HE. Not that big of a difference. But yeah, again, they try and keep it as linear as possible, whatever they can get, whatever interpolation of what they're doing to get the data out of these K-Silver sticks. It's just like that. And Collide had around 24% extra resolution, like over 200 something. But the Collide had the same issue of the, if the other axis move, then you get the dead spots and stuff pushing it. So, but here you can see it's the same thing, very linear. Comparing what Gamesir is doing to Fusion Pro 4, which I'll be making a review next. If you look at what PowerA has done, the zones are not equal. They are very much different. So there's a smaller and a larger, smaller and a larger, smaller and a larger zone. And you'll see that. So this is with a motorized push that the Fusion Pro 4 is doing. Now this might, depending how sensitive you are, this might throw you off on that controller. But yeah, Gamesir, whatever the limitations of these K-Silver sticks are, however they basically get the algorithms, they do try and get as much linear data as possible. But like I said, there are limitations, and they are coming out with newer sticks and stuff. We'll see how that changes stuff. But when it comes to the resolution, slightly less, but I didn't feel that much of a difference when it comes to G7SE. But this slightly less resolution might help with the latency. Let's look at the latency test results next. Before the latency test results, that clip diagonals are still here. So I have a precision ring, and if I move it within, you will see those clip diagonals that we have. From all the K-Silver sticks seems to be, having this kind of output that's still there. That hasn't changed. Let's take a look at the latency test. All right, just a quick explanation of what I'm doing with the latency test. Basically recording at 240 frames and making sure the recording is intra-frame, so the camera actually compresses each individual frame as a whole. Because if your camera is just doing inter-frame, what it will do is it will just write the difference between the frames. So whatever is the same, it won't write that information. So you could have some artifacts. So I make sure it's a very high data rate. Make sure that it's actually, intra-frame, and so the highest possible quality they can be. And the shutter speed has to be high enough so you have all the motion. So I use around 1,000th of a second. And then this time around, my screen is actually much better. I'm using the Gigabyte M28U. And in my previous test result, I did try to do it with the phones and stuff, and I wasn't getting equal frames in the file. So the way I do this is I will do sort of like one clip will have 5 flicks of the stick, and then restart the recording. So making sure no frames are dropped. The camera's not overheating, take a little bit of time. And this time around, what I did different was just got into a custom game and set the timer like 45 minutes. And I did all the tests in this one game, just kept on changing the controllers. Even when I changed the report rate, connected the controller to the PC, quickly changed the report rate, come back, and then tested for it. So all the test results are done in one session, one sitting, same screen, everything is the same. The left stick had a around 7-8% dead zone, so left stick was not doing any input. The right stick had a 0 dead zone. So because I was thinking that having a 0 dead zone, the drift might help controllers in the response, but then I thought it will be an equal response, so added to every controller. So 0 dead zone on the right stick. The settings were 10-10 sensitivity, linear output. And so what we are doing basically is checking which frame the stick has moved. So in this clip, it will be this frame the stick's moved. And then we'll just go and see how many frames it's taking for the screen to register anything. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And on the 6th frame, I can clearly see there's a lot of movement. Sometimes there's a movement before frame and stuff. And then basically I just have to manually go through Pixel Peep every sort of file and check what sort of results we have. So I basically use the stick caps, different colors as a reference point. So red was 1000 Hertz, green was 250 Hertz, and blue was 500 Hertz. That's for Collide only. So just I know that what controller is what. And yeah, so 40 tests on each controller and basically going through each and every clip and just writing all the results down. Let's take a look at the results now. So here are the results of the latency tests. The first one is the G7HE 1000 Hz on Series X, 6.87, and you can see how many 6 frames I got, 12, and then 7 and 8 frames. This is my G7SE 1000 Hz, the next one, and gave a bit more, a lot more 6 frame results, 7 and only 1 8 frame result. Now my G7SE has over 250 hours of game time. Its sticks are really loose, and this is what I was thinking might be. That's why it's coming a little bit quicker. But if I compare the 250 Hz result, my G7SE with 250 Hz is a lot slower than the G7HE. So that argument should hold true if the sticks are loose and is giving a little bit better results here. But I don't usually game at 250 Hz. I do find the 1000 Hz to perform a lot better for me personally. So I did play in 1000 Hz on the G7HE. But yeah, G7SE. My G7SE, which is like the pre-order, the black housing K silver sticks, in 250 Hz came a lot slower than the G7HE, and the Collide in 250 Hz was like really slow, 8.4. But the Collide does have that 24% extra resolution from the G7SE, and I would say around 29-30% extra than G7HE. And when we go, Collide basically takes advantage of the 500 Hz mode. If you set it on PC 500, then Xbox definitely sees a better performance. So I would highly recommend if you have the Collide, basically using the 500 Hz. I've already made a video on the Collide, not doing the 1000 Hz with the Xbox license. But yeah, G7HE 1000 Hz in my test didn't show as quick as the G7SE 1000 Hz, but in 250 Hz, it's definitely faster than the G7SE in 250 Hz. So gaming-wise performance, yeah, G7HE performed just like any Gamesir controller. Like I felt like I was still playing with my G7SE. Call of Duty was no problem. Whatever game style that I was choosing, it performed like a Gamesir controller. I'm so used to them, and I didn't feel like that it was hindering or anything like that. And yeah, altogether, I think the performance is still top-notch. The 1000 Hz for me definitely improved the performance. I tried playing in 250 Hz and 500. I personally much prefer the 1000 Hz on the HE on the Series X. And X-Defined is another game where the game is a little bit more picky when it comes to resolution. I do find Collide working the best for me on X-Defined. I enjoy using the Collide. And funny enough, the Elite Series 2 a lot on that game as well. But the G7HE performed really well in X-Defined as well. I had really fun time using that controller. So performance-wise, I think it's performing great. And I don't think you are losing anything if you are picking the HE over SE. So my final verdict, guys, if you want the clicky face buttons and you want the rubber grip, then, the HE is actually a really good performer. And if you need the audio, yeah, there is an argument that you go with the Collide with 500 Hz, but the 250 Hz performance, giving the audio, is not that bad on the HE either. Personally, I would say that if you need the audio, even though my results are showing that 250 Hz on the HE felt better, gave better results than Collide. But I think that 24% extra resolution on the Collide K1 definitely helps a bit more in X-Defined. Call of Duty is such a good game for any controller to test that any controller you can use and you can dial your settings in. It's not a very picky game when it comes to controllers and different settings. But yeah, I think the HE, if you have an audio setup already, going with the SE or HE is, I don't think you're losing anything. But if you need the audio, I would highly recommend checking the Collide. But I am happy that at least with the recent firmware and what Gamesir is doing with the G7HE, they are matching the performance of what we had with the SE. It definitely feels like the older SEs with 1000 Hz has some sort of like a special performance still there. And the G7HE not having that much extra performance when going from 250 Hz to 1000 Hz, but it still performs really well. Like I really enjoyed using the controller. But yeah, I'm not too keen on the rubber grips. They get a bit hot for me. I don't really care about the clicky buttons and stuff. So I do feel like maybe I should have picked up the, one of the newer G7 SE colors, whatever, but that's something that I might look at doing just to refresh my really old G7 SE, and hopefully I'll be able to see and make a video if Gamesir has changed anything with the new SEs. But yeah, that's everything is that I found that was different with the controller. Not much has changed, but if you're in the market, yeah, it's a bit more confusing decision now which one to go with. But either controller, like SE or HE, I don't think you're going to be at a loss if you are fine with their performance, if you are not too sensitive to the potentiometer versus Hall effect, because these are not the TMR stick stills. That's next, I believe, that's coming from Gamesir, and I'm really keen to try what they are going to feel like. I'd just like to say thanks to everybody who basically stuck around in my absence, and please accept my apologies if you left a comment and I didn't get back to you. Summer has been a bit hectic for me, but yeah, I'm back, and next video will be on the Fusion Pro 4, and we'll see, when the Razer Wolverine Tournament Edition comes in. Thanks a lot to everybody who subscribed. Your support means a lot. Thanks a lot for watching this video. Hopefully, I'll catch you in one of my other videos. Bye for now.